Please leave a comment where you are watching from. This took place when I was 9, living in a quiet, humid town in southern Louisiana. One of those places where neighbors wave at each other, where dogs bark more than cars honk, and where kids can still roam without much worry. My dad used to say, "The bayou watches over its own," like it was some kind of guardian spirit. I don't believe that anymore. Our backyard led into this large stretch of marshland. It wasn't beautiful or scenic, mostly mud, cattails, buzzing mosquitoes, and the occasional snake or crane. But for a kid like me, it was my kingdom, my hideaway. There was a half-rotted wooden boardwalk back there, one that disappeared into the trees after about 100 yards. It used to be part of some nature trail until the town ran out of money to keep it up. Most afternoons, I'd head down the trail with a backpack full of snacks, a juice box, my Walkman, and a flashlight I'd stolen from the garage. My favorite spot was a sagging platform at the end of the boardwalk where you could see all the way to the old pumping station, this crooked brick building no one used anymore. The first time I saw him, I thought he was just another fisherman. He stood way out past the pumping station, on a mound of dried mud, facing the trees. I remember noticing how still he was, not casting a line, not moving, just standing there like a statue. The next day he was there again. Same spot, same stance. I told my mom. She was busy getting dinner ready and barely looked up. "Just someone out hunting frogs or fishing," she said. "Stay on the boardwalk and don't talk to strangers." The third time he was closer, maybe 50 yards off, still facing away. I tried to ignore it, turned up my Walkman and ate my crackers. But I couldn't stop glancing back. Something felt off. He wasn't doing anything, just watching the trees. Frozen. Like he wasn't real. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I thought I heard footsteps outside, leaves crunching. I got up and peeked through the blinds, but all I saw was our empty backyard. The fourth day, I noticed something new, a small folding camping chair. Not where he stood, closer. Right at the start of the trail, half hidden behind a thicket. Facing the boardwalk, facing where I'd come in. I ran home that day, told my dad everything. He frowned and went outside with a flashlight, but when he came back, he just shrugged. "Didn't see anyone," he said. "But maybe stick to the yard for a while, okay?" I tried. I really did. But a few days later, I couldn't resist. Curiosity's a hell of a thing when you're 9. I went back out in the early morning. It was still foggy, dew clinging to my shoes. No sign of him. No chair. I breathed easy. Sat on the edge of the platform, legs dangling. That's when I saw something etched into one of the boards. "Come closer." It wasn't there before. It was carved deep and deliberate. Not a kid's prank. Not something old. Fresh, sharp edges in the wood. I jumped up so fast I twisted my ankle. I hobbled back down the trail, heart in my throat. When I turned around at the last bend, I swore I saw a shadow move through the cattails near where the chair had been. Just a flicker. Just enough to make me run. That night, I told my parents everything again. They called the sheriff. A deputy came out the next morning. I showed him the carving, but someone had torn the board off. Ripped it clean from the frame. Like it had never been there. My parents were furious, thought I was lying. The deputy gave me a speech about imagination, being safe, and how sometimes our minds play tricks in the woods. I stayed inside for 2 weeks after that. Then one day we got a call. The deputy, Officer Mallory, wanted to stop by. He had something to show us. Turns out, I wasn't the only kid who'd seen something. A boy across town had disappeared. 11 years old. He'd been riding his bike along the river trail and never came home. His mom said he told her he was going to the pumping station. That was the last time anyone saw him. Officer Mallory looked shaken. Said they found tire tracks and what looked like boot prints in the mud behind the station. A chair, and several carvings in the surrounding trees. Watching. Almost. Closer. After that, they shut down access to the marsh entirely. Put up signs. Fencing. Patrols. My dad even built a new fence at the edge of our property. But the strangest thing happened a month later. I was playing in the yard when I noticed something taped to the outside of our mailbox. A Polaroid photo. Faded and grainy. It showed the back of a boy sitting on the platform. My platform. He was wearing the same red jacket I used to wear. And in the background, standing just at the edge of the fog, you could barely make out a figure. Tall. Facing the boy. Facing the camera. I showed it to my dad. He didn't say a word. Just walked inside, locked all the doors, and called the sheriff again. I never saw the photo again after that. My dad said he turned it over to them, but I always wondered if he kept it. Just in case. We moved 6 months later. My dad got a job out of state, and we never talked about it again. Years went by. I'm 28 now, living in Chicago. I hadn't thought about that marsh in years, until I saw something the other night while scrolling through a local missing persons subreddit. A girl from a small town in Illinois went missing near a swampy park. Last seen walking her dog along an old wooden boardwalk. A user posted a blurry photo from someone's trail cam nearby. There was a man in the background, standing completely still, facing the trees, facing the trail. Let's never meet, man near the marsh. I used to rent a studio apartment in a historic brownstone just outside of Charleston. It was small, drafty, and a little overpriced, but I liked it. It had character, creaky hardwood floors, stained glass windows, a clawfoot tub. The kind of place you romanticize until the charm wears thin. This story took place in 2019, when I was going through a rough patch. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and was spending way too much time alone. I had started sleeping on the couch instead of my bed, eating cereal for dinner, forgetting to water my plants. My apartment complex was old enough that the walls were basically paper, and I could hear the guy upstairs cough every morning around 7:30 a.m., like clockwork. I could hear the old woman next door watching her nightly game shows. I could even hear people walking past my door in the hallway. Their footsteps were slow and clear, so I started noticing her pretty quickly. The footsteps were different, lighter. They always stopped outside my door. Not like the mailman or neighbors, or even delivery people. This person would just stand there, sometimes for 30 seconds, sometimes minutes. I'd sit there frozen on the couch, remote in my hand, holding my breath. Eventually she would move on. The first few times it happened, I chalked it up to weird building acoustics. Maybe someone was checking their phone. Maybe a neighbor had a friend over and was waiting to be buzzed in. But it kept happening, always at night, always soft. Always stopping right outside my door. Then the smell started. It was faint at first, like old roses. Not fresh ones. Not the kind you buy at a grocery store. But that powdery, perfumed scent old ladies wear. Faint and cloying and stale. It would drift under my door right after the footsteps. Just for a few seconds. Like she had been standing there with a bottle of ancient perfume waiting. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I even laughed about it once. Oh no, I'm haunted by a 1920s debutante, I joked on the phone to a friend. But I stopped laughing the night I saw the handprint. It was on my bathroom mirror. Small, delicate, like a child's or a young woman's. I live alone. No one had visited in weeks. I didn't even use the bathroom mirror anymore. I always got ready on the couch or at the little vanity near the window. The print was faint, like someone had pressed a sweaty palm against the glass and then wiped it away halfway. You could still see the outlines. The fingers were long. Too long. I cleaned it. I told myself I had touched it without realizing. A few nights later, I came home from a late shift and the apartment was freezing. My window was open, all the way up. I never opened the window. The building was old, the windows stuck, and I had no screens. Not to mention it was January. I closed it and locked it. Told myself I must have left it cracked, and the wind pushed it open. Then I found the bobby pin. It was laying on the sill. Gold and simple, like the ones I wore in high school. I hadn't used a bobby pin in years. After that, I stopped sleeping. I started keeping my phone next to me, screen brightness turned down, with the camera app open. If I heard the footsteps, I'd hit record. But every time, there was nothing. Just the sound. Just the scent. Just the feeling. One night, I decided to confront it. I waited by the door, lights off, phone in hand. At 1:13 a.m., the footsteps came, lighter than ever. Almost careful. They paused right outside my door. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Then a knock. Not loud. Not frantic. Just 3 quiet knocks. I didn't open it. I waited. I listened as she walked away, slowly, down the hall and out of hearing. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I talked to my landlord. I asked if anyone had a key to my apartment besides him. He looked confused. Said no, just me and him. I asked if anyone had lived there before me. Maybe a young woman? He pulled out the lease history and told me the last tenant had been a middle-aged man, and before that, it had been vacant for over a year. I told him about the bobby pin, the handprint, the perfume. He didn't laugh. He just said, I think that unit just gets under people's skin. The last guy said something similar. Said he felt like he was being watched all the time. I moved out 2 weeks later. I wish that was the end of the story. But it's not. 3 months after I moved, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a small white envelope, typed label. Inside was a single photo. Of me. Asleep. On the couch. Taken from just inside the apartment door. No note. No name. No explanation. I reported it, obviously. Took it to the police. They took it seriously for about 2 minutes. Said maybe an ex was stalking me. But I hadn't dated anyone in a year. I changed my number. Got a new place. Moved across the city. Still live alone. I want to start this off by saying that I've never really believed in the supernatural. No ghosts. No demons. No past lives. When I read stories about people being stalked by entities, or finding mysterious scratches on their walls, or waking up to shadow figures in their room, I usually roll my eyes. It's not that I don't think people believe those things happened. It's just that I always figured there was some more logical explanation. Stress. Night terrors. Gas leaks. That changed a few years ago when I moved to Chicago. This was in 2017. I had just turned 24 and had landed what I thought was going to be my dream job working for a small publishing company. It didn't pay much, but it was enough to cover rent, and I found a little apartment on the north side that felt like a steal. Hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, exposed brick. It even had an attic unit, technically off limits, but the landlord said I could use it for storage if I needed. The place was old. I knew that going in. You could hear the pipes gurgle when the heat kicked in. The floorboards creaked even when you stood still. The radiators clanged like they were haunted by old factory workers. None of that bothered me. In fact, I liked it. It felt like the kind of place you'd read about in a novel. Slightly run down, full of character. Besides, I was used to living alone. I had done it all through college, and I liked my independence. But that first night, something felt off. It started with the smell. It wasn't constant, more like waves. Something like mildew mixed with something sweet, like rotting fruit. Not overwhelming, but sharp enough to make you wrinkle your nose. I assumed it was the pipes, or maybe something left behind by the previous tenant. Then came the noise. It was around 2 a.m. when I first heard it. I had just started to drift off when I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, almost dragging. At first, I told myself it must be the building settling. Or maybe I was hearing my upstairs neighbors. Except, I was on the top floor. The attic was directly above me. I got up, turned on all the lights, and stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped. Total silence. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I called my landlord, Ron. He was a laid-back guy in his 60s, had owned the building for decades. I asked him if there was any chance someone else had access to the attic. Nope, he said. Only key is the one I've got on my ring. Why, you hearing squirrels or something? I told him I thought I heard someone walking up there. There was a pause. Then he laughed. Well, if someone's up there, they must be a ghost. That unit's been empty for years. Hell, it doesn't even have electricity anymore. I should have insisted he come check it. I should have pushed harder. But I didn't. I let him laugh it off, and I tried to do the same. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I'd come home to find the kitchen light on when I was certain I'd turned it off. One day, my bathroom door was locked from the inside. I had to use a screwdriver to open it. Nothing was out of place, but it made my skin crawl. I started leaving sticky notes on doors and light switches to keep track of what I was doing. I took pictures of my apartment before I left for work. I started timing my showers, trying to track whether the hot water pressure changed while I was gone. And the footsteps? They came almost every night. Same time. Same dragging rhythm. Sometimes I'd hear faint creaks in the walls, like someone pressing their ear to the drywall. Like someone was listening. I stopped sleeping. I told my co-workers about it, half joking, and one of them said, "You sure someone isn't living in your attic?" We laughed. But something in my stomach flipped. That weekend, I decided to check the attic myself. The only access point was a small door in the ceiling of my hallway. One of those square cutouts you push open with a pole. I dragged over a chair, grabbed a broom, and pushed it open. A wave of cold air rushed down. The attic was pitch dark. I shone my phone flashlight up and peered in. Dust. Cobwebs. Insulation. No signs of life. But then I saw something that made my blood freeze. A small pile of wrappers. Granola bars. Beef jerky. A half-empty water bottle. All tucked behind a beam, almost out of sight. I climbed down and called the police. They came out that afternoon. They did a sweep of the attic and the apartment. They didn't find anyone. No fingerprints. No signs of forced entry. They asked if anything had been stolen. I said no. One of the officers, the younger one, gave me a look on his way out. Pitying. Sometimes the old buildings mess with your head, he said. Could be stress. Pipes. Vivid dreams. That night, the footsteps came back. Slower. Heavier. Closer. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I started locking my bedroom door at night. I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. I put a chair under the doorknob. I even bought one of those stick-on alarms for the hallway ceiling hatch. It would go off if the door was opened. But nothing happened for weeks. Until it did. It was a Thursday. I'd been working late and didn't get home until after 10 p.m. I was exhausted. I kicked off my shoes, threw my bag on the couch, and went straight to the bathroom to shower. When I came out, the hallway light was on. I hadn't turned it on. And on the floor, just beneath the attic door, was the sticky note I'd left on the kitchen cabinet 2 days earlier. I hadn't put it there. That was when I called my friend Sam. She lived across town, but I begged her to let me crash on her couch. I didn't even pack a bag. I just grabbed my phone, my keys, and bolted. When I got to her place, I broke down. I told her everything, the smells, the sounds, the wrappers, the note. She looked freaked out, but she tried to stay calm. Stay here as long as you need, she said. You don't need to go back there. I didn't. I called in sick the next day and made an appointment with a property manager to break my lease. Ron didn't even argue, just told me he'd had other tenants get weirded out by that unit, too. It took me a week to find a new place. I hired movers to go back and pack up my stuff. I didn't step foot in that apartment again. At least, I thought I didn't. Here's where it gets really messed up. A month after I moved out, I got a call from a detective. He asked if I had lived at the address on Sheridan Avenue. I said yes. Then he asked if I knew a man named Walter Grigsby. I said no. He paused. Then he told me they had found Walter's body in the crawlspace of the attic apartment, the one directly above mine. He'd been dead for weeks. Apparently, a plumber was doing work on the top floor and smelled something off. They opened the old crawlspace and found him curled up in a corner, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by trash. No ID. No phone. Just a half-eaten sandwich and a sketchbook filled with drawings of a woman. Me. The detective said he had likely been living up there for a while, maybe even before I moved in. The only way in or out was the hatch in my hallway. I don't know how long he was up there. I don't know if he ever came down while I was asleep. But I do know this. One of the sketches was dated 2 weeks before I found the note on the floor. In the drawing, I was standing in the bathroom mirror. And behind me was him. This is something I haven't really talked about with anyone outside of my family and 1 or 2 close friends. I'm still not sure what to call it. Stalking, manipulation, obsession? None of those words really feel big enough. All I know is that it happened, and that it changed how I look at people, maybe forever. In 2015, I got a job at a mid-sized marketing firm in Richmond. I was 26, newly single, trying to get back on my feet after a bad breakup and a cross-country move. It wasn't my dream job, but the office was nice, the work was manageable, and the people seemed normal. That's how I met Rachel. She started about 3 months after me, in the same department. We sat near each other, not side by side, but across the aisle, and she was hard not to notice. Tall, put together, a little intense. She had that cool girl energy, boots, dark eyeliner, always had a book in her hand, the kind of person who made you feel dumber just by being in the same room. At first I felt kind of awkward around her, but she was friendly in her own way. Witty, thoughtful, observant. The first time we talked one-on-one was after a team meeting. She complimented my laptop stickers, obscure bands, and an old-school cartoon she said she hadn't seen since she was a kid. From there, we started chatting more. She'd stop by my desk, send me funny links during meetings, invite me to happy hour. Nothing over the top, just enough to make me feel like I had a friend at work. I learned she had just moved from Asheville. Said she'd had a bad breakup too. Told me she didn't really talk to her family anymore. Toxic, she said, without elaborating. She lived alone, didn't really use social media, claimed she was trying to declutter her digital footprint. I respected that. We started hanging out outside of work. Drinks turned into weekend brunch, which turned into movie nights at my apartment. She always brought snacks and would insist on staying late to clean up. At first I appreciated the help. I've never been the tittiest person, but after a while, it started to feel like she was inserting herself a little too much. She'd comment on my laundry being backed up, ask who I was texting, rearrange things in my bathroom for easier access. Little things, but weird in context. One night we were watching something on Netflix, and she fell asleep on my couch. I went to bed and left her there. Around 3 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom and found my bedroom door cracked open. She was just standing there, in the dark. I kind of jumped like, "Jesus, Rachel, you scared me." She didn't flinch, just looked at me and said, "I couldn't sleep." I asked if she needed anything. She said no, then turned and walked back to the couch. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, she acted like nothing happened. That was when I started pulling back. I stopped inviting her over. I was always busy when she asked to hang out. At work, I kept things short, polite but distant. I figured she'd get the hint. She didn't. Instead, she started ramping things up. One morning, I came into the office and there was a coffee waiting on my desk. No note, just sitting there. I assumed it was a nice gesture until I took a sip and realized it was exactly how I take my coffee: almond milk, half a pump of caramel, extra ice. I never told her how I took my coffee. A week later, I found a picture frame on my desk. Inside was a photo of me and my ex, one that had been buried deep in my old Facebook albums. We weren't friends on Facebook. When I asked her about it, she just smiled and said, "I thought you might want to remember who you were before him." That was the first time I really felt scared of her. I went to HR. I didn't want to make a thing out of it. I just asked if they could maybe move her to a different pod, or at least not schedule us together. I was vague, trying to keep it professional. They told me they'd look into it. 2 days later, I came home to find my door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing. Nothing broken. But I know I locked it. I always do. And someone had been inside. My books were rearranged. My throw blanket was folded differently. The candle on my table had been burned down, like it had been lit. I called the police. Filed a report. I even asked them to fingerprint the door handle, but they told me without proof of forced entry or a known suspect, there wasn't much they could do. The officer suggested it might have been a forgetful moment. That night, I bought a camera and set it up in my living room. The next morning, I checked the footage. At 2:38 a.m., the door opened. Rachel stepped inside. She walked straight to my bookshelf, picked something out, a journal I kept on the bottom shelf, flipped through it, and then sat down on my couch and read it for over an hour. At 3:47 a.m., she got up, went into my bathroom, and came out 5 minutes later holding something I couldn't quite make out. Then she left. I took the footage straight to the police. They took it seriously this time. Opened a case. I pressed charges for unlawful entry. They arrested her the following day at work. I didn't go in. I couldn't. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because when the cops searched her apartment, they found more. A folder labeled with my name, full of printouts of emails, photos, receipts from restaurants I had gone to, copies of my resume, my LinkedIn profile, a few personal photos I'd only ever kept on my laptop. She had broken in more than once. Worse, she had been posing as me online. Fake social accounts. Fake email. She'd messaged people I hadn't talked to in years pretending to be me. Some of the messages were sweet. Some were creepy. When she was interviewed, she told them she and I were in a relationship, that we lived together, that she was protecting me. She said I just didn't remember because of the trauma. She wasn't charged with stalking, only with unlawful entry, identity fraud, and harassment. She pled out, got probation, therapy, and a no-contact order. I moved out of Richmond a month later. Sometimes, I still think about how easily she wormed her way in, how normal she seemed, how I almost didn't go to HR, how I might not have set up that camera. But what really keeps me up at night is this. I still don't know what she took from my bathroom that night. This started almost exactly a year ago. It still messes with my head to talk about, but I think writing it out is the only way to get some kind of closure, or at least perspective. I was living in a small city in central Washington, not exactly rural, but not urban either. The kind of town with a population under 100K, where you see the same faces at the grocery store every week. I was working from home as a virtual assistant, mostly for clients I never met in person. It was isolating sometimes, but I liked the quiet. I liked my routine. Every morning I walked to the same little coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. I'd get a cold brew and a spinach feta wrap and bring it back to my desk. I did this 5, sometimes 6 days a week. I even sat at the same table by the window while I waited. So when the new barista asked, "The usual?" before I even said a word, I wasn't that surprised. I smiled and said, "Yeah, thanks," and she rang me up like it was nothing. Then she said, "You were in yesterday afternoon too, right?" I paused. "No," I said. "Just this morning." She tilted her head, clearly confused. "Huh. Must have been someone who looks a lot like you." She ordered the same thing. Even had the same shoes, I think. I laughed it off. Said I had one of those faces. But it stuck with me. That afternoon, I opened my email and saw a password reset message from Facebook. I hadn't logged into Facebook in years. I figured it was spam and deleted it. That was the first one. Over the next couple of days, I got more: Instagram, Spotify, even my online banking app. I reset my passwords, set up two-factor authentication on everything. I assumed it was some kind of phishing scam, just bad luck. Then one day, I opened Netflix and found new profiles. 3 of them, all under different names: Cassie, Lonnie, and Me Nail Polish. Each had been used recently. One was halfway through a reality dating show I'd never seen. Another was watching some low-budget true crime docuseries about female con artists. I lived alone. I changed the password and kicked all the users off. That should have been it. But then the packages started showing up. It was little things at first: a pack of colorful socks, a tube of lipstick in a shade I'd never wear, then a black hoodie with a band logo I didn't recognize. All shipped to my address in my name. I checked my Amazon account, no record of any purchases. That weekend, I went to Target and paid in cash. When I got home, I found a receipt in my purse for items I hadn't bought. The timestamp said it had been printed 2 days earlier. It was for things like a disposable phone charger, a pair of black gloves, and hair dye. I started feeling like I was losing it. I went back to the coffee shop, hoping to clear my head. As I waited in line, the same barista smiled and said, "Back again?" I hadn't been there in 2 weeks. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "You were here last night. You came in right before close. You had your hoodie up, though, so maybe it wasn't you." I felt cold all over. "What did she look like?" I asked. She hesitated. "Honestly, she looked exactly like you. Same eyes. Same voice. Even said her name was Leah." "That's my name." I asked if she still had the security footage. She said no. Their system purges it every 24 hours. But she looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. Like she knew something was wrong and didn't know how to fix it. That night, I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my front door unlocking. I froze. I live in an old apartment with a deadbolt and a separate latch, the kind you can only slide shut from the inside. I always use both. I got up slowly, heart pounding, and tiptoed into the hallway. The deadbolt was unlocked. The latch was still in place. No one was inside. But there on the doormat, inside the apartment, was a receipt from a local convenience store. Dated just 20 minutes earlier. Paid in cash. There was a lipstick print on the edge. The police came. Took a report. Said it might be a prank. A roommate or ex with a spare key. I told them I lived alone. I showed them the receipt. They wrote it down and left. That's when I bought a Ring camera. Installed it the next morning. I also changed the locks. New deadbolt. New latch. Even one of those hotel-style door stoppers you jam from the inside. I felt better for a little while. Until I checked the footage. The camera sends me a notification anytime there's motion outside my door. I got one at 4:17 a.m. the following Thursday. The clip was 15 seconds long. It showed a woman in a black hoodie standing outside my door. She had her hood up. She stood completely still, facing the peephole. Then, without moving her hands, she smiled, just slightly, and walked out of frame. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew in my bones it was me. I contacted the police again. Showed them the footage. They said it might be someone who looked like me. A copycat, maybe. Someone trying to mess with me. They took another report. Promised to increase patrols. Nothing changed. Except now, I started seeing her around town. Always at a distance. In reflections. Passing on the other side of the street. Once, in the bathroom mirror of a bookstore. A flash of movement in the stall behind me that vanished when I turned around. No one ever believed me. They said it was stress. Paranoia. Dissociation. That I needed to unplug and see someone. So I did. I went to a therapist. I showed her the clips. The photos. The receipts. She listened carefully and said something I'll never forget. Do you think it's possible that someone isn't just pretending to be you, but trying to replace you? That idea burrowed in and never left. The next night, I got another alert from the camera. I opened the video. It was black. Someone had removed the camera and taped a Polaroid over the lens. It was a picture of me sleeping, taken from inside the apartment. I moved the next day, packed up everything I owned, and left the city. I didn't tell anyone except my sister where I was going. I changed my phone number, deleted all my accounts, started over. For a while, I thought I was safe. Then last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in perfect handwriting. Inside was a printed-out photo of her, in my old apartment, wearing my clothes, holding up my journal, and smiling. I've never told anyone the full version of this story. Even now, over a decade later, I still don't like thinking about it, but I think about it often. This happened when I was 14, the summer before high school. My parents had just gotten divorced, and my mom, doing her best to keep me out of the house while she figured her life out, sent me to a sleepaway camp in rural Pennsylvania. The kind with no phones, no TVs, no contact with the outside world except for handwritten letters. It was called Camp Red Pine. It had been around since the 1950s, old-school cabins, canoes on the lake, nightly bonfires. There were about 60 kids total and a staff of maybe 15 counselors. Everyone had a buddy system, and most people were either returning campers or siblings of returners. I was one of the few first-timers, which made me a bit of an outsider right off the bat. My cabin had 6 girls in it and one counselor, Carla. She was probably 19 or 20. Tall, thin, with that bleached blonde, over-tanned look that was still trendy in the early 2010s. The first day we got there, she didn't say much. Just told us the rules, showed us where the bathrooms were, and then sat in her bunk for most of the evening listening to music on her off-brand iPod. I remember thinking she didn't really seem to like kids. Most of the other counselors were energetic, silly, loud. Carla was cold. Not mean, just blank. Still, everything seemed normal the first few days. We did arts and crafts, learned archery, sang songs around the fire. I started making friends. Things were fine. Until the night I woke up, and she wasn't there. Each counselor had a small bed at the back of their cabin. Hers was empty. It was around 2:30 a.m. I remember that clearly because I had my watch on. I'd woken up because I thought I'd heard someone whispering. I sat up, listening, but all I heard was the crickets. Everyone else in the cabin was asleep. I figured Carla had gone to the bathroom and tried to go back to sleep. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Like I was being watched. The next morning, she was back in her bunk, looking completely normal. I almost asked her if she'd gone out in the night, but something about her expression made me hesitate. Then that night, the whispering came again. This time I stayed awake. It started soft, almost like wind. But then I heard it clearly. Don't tell her. Don't tell her. Don't tell her. Over and over. I sat up in bed and saw a shape standing at the back window. I thought it might be Carla, but it was too small and too still. I whispered, "Who's there?" The shape turned and disappeared into the dark. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I told Carla. I said I thought someone was outside the cabin during the night. She stared at me for a long time and then just said, "Don't wander at night. There are animals." That was it. No concern. No follow-up. Nothing. That's when I started keeping a notebook. Every night, I'd write down what I saw, what I heard, what time I woke up. And the whispering continued. Different words. Sometimes. She sees you. You're not supposed to be here. You're mine now. I started noticing Carla missing at night more often. Always around the same time. Sometimes for 20 minutes. Sometimes longer. One night, I decided to follow her. I waited until I heard the creak of her bed, then watched through slitted eyes as she got up, slowly opened the cabin door, and slipped outside. I counted to 60, then got up, pulled on my hoodie, and followed her barefoot. The woods behind the cabins were thick, with a narrow trail leading toward the lake. I kept my distance, staying far enough back not to be seen. She walked in complete silence. Not a single flashlight. No noise. Like she'd done it 100 times. She stopped in a clearing near the water. The moonlight was just bright enough to see her silhouette. And she was talking to someone. At first I thought maybe it was another counselor. But no one else was there. She was facing nothing. Just the edge of the lake. Her hands were at her sides. Her head tilted slightly like she was listening. Occasionally she'd nod. Then she stepped into the lake. Not just her feet. She kept walking until she was waist deep. And then she stopped again. That's when I heard the whisper, loud and clear, directly in my ear. Get back! I ran. Back through the woods, back to the cabin. I dove into bed and pretended I had been there the whole time. My heart didn't stop pounding for hours. She came back about 20 minutes later. Wet. Muddy. Her feet left streaks on the floor. She climbed into bed without saying a word. The next day, another camper went home. Her name was Bethany. She was in my cabin. She had woken up with a nosebleed that wouldn't stop, Carla said. Staff took her to the nurse and called her parents. I never saw her again. That was the third girl that week who'd gone home early. By week 3, half my cabin was gone. On Thursday, I wrote a letter to my mom, begging her to pick me up. I didn't say why. I just told her I was homesick and that I didn't feel safe. She never got the letter. I found it the next day in the trash bin outside the mess hall, half burned. I knew it was mine. I had drawn a little star on the envelope. I started planning how I'd leave on my own. Then came the final night. We were supposed to have a bonfire, celebrate the end of the session. But it rained. Thunder, lightning, heavy wind. The counselors canceled the fire and told everyone to stay in their cabins. That night, Carla was in her bunk. I pretended to be asleep. Sometime around 1 a.m., I heard the door creak open. I waited. Then the whispers started again. But this time they were inside. One voice. Then another. And another. I opened my eyes just a sliver, and I saw them. Shapes. Pale and long-limbed. Pressed up against the walls. Hanging from the rafters. Kneeling beside the bunks. Their eyes weren't eyes. Just holes. Like burned paper. And they were looking at Carla. Not me. Her. She sat up. Smiled. And said, I've brought you enough. This one's mine. One of the shapes turned toward me. Carla stood and put herself between us. No, she said. This one's mine. The rest of the night is a blur. I woke up the next morning in my bunk. My pillow damp. My body ice cold. Carla was gone. Another counselor came to get us and said she'd gone home early. When my mom picked me up that afternoon, I cried the whole way home. She asked what happened. I told her it was just a bad experience. She believed me. Kind of. I kept the notebook. Sometimes I reread it and wonder how much of it I made worse in my mind. I was sleep-deprived, scared, emotional. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I looked up Camp Red Pine a few years later. It had shut down in 2018. No explanation. Just an announcement about maintenance and insurance concerns. But I found a Reddit thread talking about the closure. One user, anonymous, no profile picture, left a single comment. Some counselors offer the kids. But some kids offer themselves. Either way, the woods always take. I didn't sleep that night. Let's never meet again, Carla. Or whatever you were.